Magicians. Love them, hate them, make a feature-length comedy film about them, the choices really are all there. And in 2007, a group of people decided to do the latter. So arrives the rather aptly named Magicians. Don't ask how they do it, ask why. Or as this other DVD release, whose cover looks like it has had a PowerPoint text box cruelly added onto it, says, "What you get isn't always what you see." Although at least David Mitchell looks like a human being on that cover, unlike on one of the Russian releases of this film where he looks like this. Some sort of claymation abomination meets a plastic surgery addict that has been poorly drawn by a child. I'm sorry, but holy shit, what the hell is going on here? Absolute nightmare fuel. Magicians is the film debut of David Mitchell and the second film that Robert Webb appeared in after his first outing a year earlier in the comedy Confetti, a film which I've already spoken about in length. If you haven't seen my video about Confetti, basically it's this improvised film about weddings and it's just a complete disaster. Plus his character was a nudist and the director lied to him about how much would be shown uncensored, leading to Robert appearing completely naked without his consent, and then he only found out about this at the premiere of the film. A truly awful situation all round.
It's all just shit, the whole thing!
But he didn't let that deter him, and so Rob sprung back onto the big screen with a crew he was a lot more familiar with. Magicians was written by, amongst others, Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong, the creators of Peep Show, who Mitchell and Webb obviously have a really good relationship with, and it was directed by Andrew O'Connor, who is the producer on Peep Show, so we do have a very real Peep Show connection here. Normally I think comparisons between extraneous Mitchell and Webb material and Peep Show are pretty pointless, but given the big overlap between it and Magicians, I could see how someone could go into this film expecting something at the level of brilliance as Peep Show. Plus this is from 2007, around the time that many would probably consider to be the golden era of that show, when all those involved were really in their stride.
How's it looking, Mark? Looking good, right?
Oh, it is looking so good, Alan.
I'm sure expectations were very high from a lot of people, and so does Magicians manage to pull something great out of his hat, or does it make the laughter disappear?
You must admit, it is going well.
Maybe so far the whole thing isn't a total fucking fiasco.
I don't think I'd ever seen Magicians before watching it to talk about it here, or at least if I had, it was so long ago that I couldn't really remember anything about it now. But I can imagine this is the kind of film that some people would definitely be nostalgic for. Obviously I'm not one of those people, so instead of going in with rose-tinted glasses on, I instead had my cynical, jaded, I don't know, beige-tinted glasses on. But overall I thought Magicians was somewhere between mediocre and fine. Not exactly high praise, I know. I don't think this film is awful, and there definitely are some good moments in it that I'd say were fun, but it's certainly not great, and I just found it rather disappointing as a whole. I was expecting something a lot better given some of the talent attached to this project. I really wanted to start here by giving a glowing review and to be saying that this is some sort of forgotten diamond in the rough that should have become a cult hit, but no, I don't think that's really the case. Magicians is unfortunately rather underwhelming, and barring a few standout scenes, is mostly forgettable.
You think I won't be very good, but in fact, I will be very good, and that will be very interesting for me.
So I think I'd agree with the general consensus from both critics and audiences about this film. It has received a lot of middling ratings, 2s or 3s out of 5, 5 or 6 out of 10. Even the most positive of reviews don't seem all that positive.
I know what you're implying.
I didn't say it.
The implication is clear.
Magicians is, funnily enough, a film about magicians. Robert Webb plays Carl Allen and David Mitchell plays Harry Kane. Yes, just like the footballer. Kane with a K and everything, though this is obviously before he was well known, so David's character is not named after him. Carl and Harry were a fairly successful magic double act, performing live shows on stage, until Harry finds Carl presumably having sex with his wife and magician's assistant, played by Sarah Hadland.
Oh, I don't know.
I say presumably because I assume that is what is supposed to be going on in this shot here, though it looks more like a rather awkward cuddle due to how tight the box is. The three of them go on stage to perform the guillotine trick, where it looks like a victim gets their head cut off only to appear magically alive afterwards. But the trick goes wrong and Harry ends up actually decapitating his wife. Was it a tragic accident or did he do it on purpose? These events cause the double act to split up and presumably puts a dampener on both of their magical careers. Cut to 4 years later, Harry gets fired from his job at Wilkinson's for doing a trick at work, and Carl is now working under the name Mindmonger and is an unsuccessful illusionist alongside his wacky agent Otto, played by Darren Boyd.
Not married to the beard?
Harry finds out about a magic competition that is taking place on the island of Jersey, and he wants to enter, but as his previous assistant is now dead, he ends up having to replace her with an ex-work colleague, the quirky Linda, played by Jessica Hines.
I liked it.
great.
Carl reluctantly agrees to join him and form the double act again for the competition, though once at the venue, the relationship breaks down once again and the two split up, making the pair now rivals in the competition.
Put me down as a solo act.
Okay, fine. If he's going solo, I'll go solo too.
The competition, which is hosted by Peter Capaldi, playing a character named Something.
Sick bastard.
While Harry and Linda's relationship develops through the pair working on their tricks, Carl is getting to know a woman named Danny, played by Andrea Riseborough, who he met while failing to pitch his illusionist act to a television company. She has come to Jersey to watch him perform as she genuinely believes that he is a psychic.
Well, would you like a drink?
God, that is freaky. You knew exactly what I was thinking.
Things happen, like some jokes from the crude Tony White, aka Steve Edge, aka Daryl from Peep Show for fans of this channel.
Do I actually look like the sort of bloke who'd suck off a duck?
And Carl gets buried up to his head in sand because it looks good in the trailer. Then Harry thinks that Linda has left him to go home because she found out about the fact that he, potentially accidentally, killed his wife, which he had neglected to tell her all this time. Turns out she didn't leave him and it was just a misunderstanding.
Right. You've changed rooms.
Do they love each other? Maybe. Did Linda have sex with Daryl from Peep Show in the meantime? Maybe. Then Carl tries to have sex with Danny, but she keeps trying to get him to contact her dead dad using his psychic Darren Brown powers.
He says, Carl's a good guy. Trust Carl.
In the best scene of the film, Carl and Otto hire a stooge, played by Alex McQueen, to use in their act.
Who, me?
Then the final half hour of the film is mostly the big magic show event competition thing. Carl's performance goes badly. Then in Harry's one, Linda backs out with the guillotine stunt, but Carl offers himself up to fill the role for her. So now the man who caused Harry to maybe kill his wife is in the exact same situation that his wife was in when she was killed. We've come full magic circle. They do the stunt successfully, which doesn't really make sense with how this whole bit is supposed to play out. Where does the fake head come from if Carl was a last minute stand-in? Oh well. Then Harry wins the competition. Hooray. The two leads form their double act again, with Linda and Danny becoming their assistants. They do the sword-stabbing levitation trick from the poster and then the film ends.
I don't want to tell you again, so fuck you, yeah? Fuck you.
If my snarky retelling of the plot didn't make it obvious, I don't think the story of this film is all that good. It's clunky and doesn't work overly well. Lots of strange decisions from characters and things happening for no reason other than because, or seemingly only to pad the runtime, which is just long enough to get audiences in for a feature-length film. One of the most egregious examples of this is throughout the film there are a couple of magic fans who are following the competition, one of which is Marek Larwood from We Are Clang, if anyone remembers that, and they have absolutely no effect on anything in the film at all. They only exist to be shown in cutaway shots that tell the audience what the mood of the scene is, or to look weird to try and get a cheap laugh. It's so unlike the writing style you'd expect from those involved.
Shit, Kane and Allen.
I've achieved what?
There are multiple subplots that feel pointless because they're neither particularly funny nor are they engaging from a story perspective. Otto may be gay and keep pseudo-flirting with Carl.
Of course there's an us, it's me and you, together, the team, having a laugh, kissing.
Tony White has a son that is also a magician and the two have a bad relationship.
How you doing, kid? I've not seen you for,
7 months.
Yeah, something like that.
These things are introduced and have no real payoff and ultimately feel like pointless filler. It's a peculiar screenplay. The core story of the double act breaking up, becoming rivals and eventually pairing back up to win the competition is very simple and predictable. It's the exact kind of setup you'd expect for a film like this. But then it has all of these extra bits on the side which feel underdeveloped to the point that they aren't satisfying and nobody's really going to care about them, but then they're too big to also ignore. It makes the film feel like it's not sure what it's trying to be. I think they should have focused more on the comedy between David and Rob's characters and less on these other elements.
Shut up and apologise.
Shut up and apologise.
There is quite a lot of background given on the creation of this film in the commentary track that is included on the DVD extras for Magicians, and it gives an insight into why the script may have turned out the way that it did. So Andrew O'Connor, the director, was the one that originally had the idea to make a film about magicians because he has a background within the world of magic. He won the Magic Circle's Young Magician of the Year award in 1981 and has produced many magic-related TV shows in the past, like lots of things with Darren Brown, as well as comedies. So he wanted to combine these two ideas and make a magic-based comedy film that he would direct. He had never directed a film prior to Magicians, by the way. So he wrote up a treatment for the film alongside 3 other magicians or magic-related people, I don't really know what the correct terminology is here, David Britland, Andy Nyman and Anthony Owen.
Andrew O'Connor the director came up with the idea and sort of worked it out with a few magician mates.
Then this treatment was passed along to Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong, who wrote the whole thing up and turned it into a feature-length screenplay. But as it turns out, the final version of Magicians is actually completely different to how the film started out as. It was originally a mockumentary with talking head segments and the like, but then it was changed to be a more conventionally shot film as those involved thought it would work out better, but also because they thought that mockumentaries were a bit overdone at this period of time.
Talking to you, Ollie, we sort of decided that we'd dump the mock doc thing.
Ollie chomped on his cigar and said, "Make it a normal picture, guys."
This would have obviously required much of the film to be completely rewritten, as they would have had to cut out or drastically alter instances of characters talking to the camera. As I mentioned earlier, Robert Webb had just been in a film named Confetti, which was styled as a mockumentary, and I can understand why they wouldn't want to make it feel like this film is just copying that one, as they're both ensemble British comedy films that focus on people competing in a competition to win a cash prize, starring actors who mostly built their careers on TV. In fact, multiple actors appear in both films. Robert Webb, Jessica Hines and Sarah Hadland are in both Confetti and Magicians. So from the perspective of those behind the scenes, changing the style of the film and all the work that would have had to have gone along with this was probably deemed just a necessary bullet that they were going to have to bite.
Oh, that's nice.
On the topic of Confetti, it's obviously a film that Robert really didn't enjoy being a part of, and he thought the film turned out horribly, and as it was still fresh in his mind around the time that Magicians was being made, there are multiple instances on the extras for this film where he just rips into Confetti and says how shit he thinks it is, which I just found hilarious.
In Confetti, an inferior British comedy of 2006, the difference being a funny script deliberately written to be funny, i.e. there is one.
There's been a lot of those mock documentary movies around, including Confetti.
They're not always terribly successful.
But back onto Magicians. As I said, the film was rewritten to be shot completely differently, but also the story and the events that occur in the film were heavily changed too. Entire subplots were originally different. For example, Otto, Carl's assistant, was originally a woman, but then this was changed to him being a man and having these strange moments where he keeps coming onto Carl that don't really work in my opinion.
If you're gay, that's fine.
Gay? What? What do you mean gay? It's not the 80s.
The magic competition in the film is set on the island of Jersey, which seems like a bit of a strange choice as it doesn't really play into the film much, beyond allowing for David Mitchell's character to have a pointless fear of flying that he overcomes to little fanfare shortly after introducing this idea. But indeed, the entire setting of the film was also something that was changed during production. They originally wanted to set the film on the Isle of Man because they believed there was some tax break they could get for filming there, so it was written into the film that the magic competition would take place on the Isle of Man.
We had in our mind that there was tax breaks to be had for filming in Isle of Man. I don't think even anyone told us that.
But then it turns out, at that moment in time, there were no tax advantages for shooting there, making the decision to set the film there completely pointless. But then people who became aware of the film's production found out that they were using the Isle of Man, and they thought it was cheesy as they believed the only reason to film there was for tax reasons. So the writers then changed the setting to Jersey, as the film was already written around the film taking place on an island. But then, outside of a few establishing shots, none of the film was actually even shot in Jersey anyway, making this whole endeavour pretty much pointless in the first place.
Now that's a little shot there of Jersey, where none of the actors ever went.
There's also a bit on the commentary track where they talk about the issues they faced relating to the funding of this film. Even after filming was already underway, not all of the funds had been secured, and the producers were buying things on credit cards to allow the production to continue. The cast and crew weren't even being paid when they should have been, and the producer, Ollie Madden, was actually midway through writing a script to read to the crew to tell them that the production would have to be cancelled before he got confirmation to say they had secured the money. David and Robert didn't even know the project was potentially hours away from being stopped until they heard about it during the recording of this commentary track. It's quite incredible.
Bloody hell. That's the first time Robert and David have heard
anything about that.
So basically, this film went through a lot of issues and changes during development, altering the structure, the setting, the characters, all things that would have resulted in a lot of work. But yet it was also made by a core group of people that had little to no experience working on a project like this. The director had never directed a film before, the writers had never written a film before, the producer had never produced a film before, and only one of the leads had ever even been in a film before. Given that information, it's not a surprise that Magicians feels like quite a messy final product.
I mean, of course, you're going to get a few letters muddled here or there. I can't even get my broadband working half the time, you know.
One of my big gripes with Magicians is, funnily enough, with the actual magicians, or more generally the way that this film goes about incorporating magic. As I said, Andrew O'Connor, the director, has a long history with magic. He was a magician himself, he has produced magic-related TV shows, he was previously a member of the Magic Circle, which is like the Guild of Magicians, and so on. He has a real personal connection to the subject matter, which you think would be a really good thing, but I think his enthusiasm for magic was kind kind of misguided here. This film makes a huge deal about how all the magic is authentic.
And these are real magicians and real tricks.
Real magicians, real tricks, really being done.
All throughout the bonus material for this film, it's repeatedly stated how great effort went into the magic. All these random background magicians who appear in the film, they're all actual magic performers in real life.
The movie's peppered with some real magicians. So this guy's called Pat Page. He's in his mid-70s. He's one of the world's most famous magicians.
Every trick and prop was run past a magic consultant who is apparently an esteemed figure in the magic world.
So every trick that you see in the film, Scott has either built, designed, looked after, taught the magicians.
All of the stalls in the magic exhibition thing are actually real people that sell this stuff in real life.
They all set up the real magic stalls and they all demonstrated real tricks that they really sell.
All the actors had to learn real magic tricks and illusions.
Tricks that you'll see in the Magician's movie. A lot of classic tricks.
Guillotine illusion.
A lot of smaller magic as well. David is doing the multiplying billiard balls, which is a classic.
Levitation, guillotining, sub-trunk stuff.
This is some dove productions, linking rings. This is some card manipulations.
They had cooperation from the Magic Circle. The magic shop in the film is an actual magic shop in real life.
When I was a child magician, I bought my first ever tricks there, and the man who sold them to me is in the movie.
The original treatment for the film was written by magicians.
And sort of worked it up with a few magician mates.
So much effort and detail paid to make all the magic related aspects of this film feel real. But ultimately, for the vast majority of the audience, none of this matters.
Unless you can turn water into wine, this lot aren't interested.
It's a generic comedy film that pretty much everyone that's going to see it is going to see because it has Mitchell and Webb in the lead roles. It makes no difference to the viewer whether this performer that is shown in the background of two scenes is Ming the Mind Master. Or whether David Mitchell does some magic trick for 3 seconds authentically. We're watching an edited film on a screen. You can make anything look real with editing and using multiple cuts. It's not impressive. There's a bit in the extras where Robert Webb says that he was supposed to learn a trick where he rolls a coin across his knuckles, and he spent 4 weeks learning how to do it, and then he couldn't even do it by the end, and so they replaced the trick with something else.
See? And it dropped on the floor, and it always drops on the floor. That's what happens.
What the hell was the point then? Do you care that much about Robert being able to perform a trick authentically for what must have been at most a few seconds of footage, that you're willing to change your script to accommodate him not being able to do it? Couldn't you have just shown a close-up of someone else doing the trick that nobody would have even noticed wasn't Robert? It would make literally no difference to the final product. You know, I really like The Matrix, but when I found out that time didn't really slow down when Keanu Reeves dodged those bullets and it was just a special effect, I immediately burned my copy of it. 1 out of 10.
I'm sorry, it's fun, magical fun.
It feels like such a huge waste to have spent so much time on what is essentially window dressing for a broad comedy like this, and window dressing that 99% of your audience won't even realise is window dressing in the first place at that. It's like they forgot that this was supposed to be a comedy film about magic and not a magic film about comedy. I get that all this effort probably works out to this being pretty cool for those that are actually involved in this magic subculture and they know who all these people are, but there has to be such an extraordinarily small amount of people in terms of the general audience for this film. And you know, this emphasis on making the magic legitimate would be completely fine if the rest of the film was really great. Like when you find out that the space stuff in 2001: A Space Odyssey not only looks nice, but it's also apparently really scientifically accurate. It's cool. It's a sci-fi film at the end of the day. All the physics being accurate doesn't particularly matter, but the fact that it is just like the cherry on top. But when the rest of your film isn't so great, and to an outsider it looks like all the effort went into making sure that the great Phantasmo, or whatever these people are called, gets a 2-second cameo to show off his magical floating beans in one scene, instead of making the rest of the film better, it looks like your efforts were wasted.
No, that's not the truth. That's not at all the truth.
There's another bit on the DVD extras, which you can probably tell by how much I've referenced them, are actually really interesting, where David Mitchell makes a comment about how magicians are weird because they're people with no charisma who have found a way to appear on stage despite having no real talent other than practicing something a lot.
Magic, in some ways, is show business for people without any charisma.
It's a funny, if harsh comment, but like, doesn't that go against what the film is trying to do? Why couldn't they have gotten fun actors to appear as these other magicians instead of uncharismatic, genuine magicians who don't get enough screen time to prove they're proper magicians anyway?
Quick shake. Turns white.
I'd have much preferred a cast of funny or eye-catching background characters to be along for the ride, rather than some guy who happens to be able to make it look like he can make a ring go through another ring if you look at it from just the right angle. Sorry, mini rant over here, but I just find it completely bizarre how insistent they were on making all the magic-related aspects of this film authentic, when, hyperbolically speaking, no one cares.
We have spent a couple of months training them to do magic, and they worked out surprisingly well.
Though something that does matter in a comedy film is obviously the comedy, which I haven't really touched on yet. This film has a few genuinely great scenes that I thought worked out great, proper Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong writing in some moments, awkward humour, great back and forths, or an intentional lack of in some scenes. Shout out to Alex McQueen for a fantastic performance.
Who, me? I can't believe it. No.
But in general, this is a much more broad comedy than something like Peep Show. Less hard-hitting dark moments, more wacky, goofy stuff. Isn't it funny that Robert Webb puts the Mr. Potato Head features on his face? Ha. There are some brilliant lines that do sound like they could have come straight out of Peep Show though, particularly some spoken by David that could fit into some Mark Corrigan dialogue with no changes whatsoever.
Well, I don't like to fly. Actually, that may or may not be true because I've never actually flown.
Enjoys Thai food. What is wrong with liking Thai food?
I just think it's samey.
But most of the time the jokes just aren't that funny. There are certain characters like Otto and Danny that I felt were especially poor. Mitchell and Webb themselves give decent performances, nothing special, but okay. Their undeniable chemistry saves the scene a lot of the time, and as a fan of theirs I couldn't help but find them somewhat endearing. Peter Capaldi is alright, Steve Edge made me laugh a few times because of how blunt his character is, and Jessica Hines was often fun. There is such a good cast here, but it just doesn't click in a way that it could have done. I'm gonna chalk this one up to the story though. It's just not an overly funny premise to begin with, and having the film go from a potentially interesting love affair, murder, washed up magician story to a predictable middle-of-the-road romantic comedy with the sappy ending feels like such a waste of potential. Sam and Jesse have a great track record of turning seemingly mundane characters in mundane situations into brilliant comedies that perfectly balance the humour with the story, and they went on to do the same after the release of this film too. Like a few years after this, they both wrote on 4 Lions, which is absolutely fantastic, but Magicians just seems like a complete dud for them. It honestly just feels like the humour doesn't work because the premise kinda sucks, and with a team that were inexperienced within feature-length films, nobody stepped in and pushed the project in a better direction. The fact that Sam and Jesse wrote the film based on a treatment that was given to them rather than it being something they thought up themselves may have also been the cause for this. I found the best moments to be those that didn't feature any magic-related things, and in which I can forget about the general story, and I can picture the lines coming from characters these actors have portrayed in other projects. Like, man, wouldn't that line fit so well if Daisy said it to Tim in space? Wouldn't it have been great if this interaction was between Mark and Daryl in Peep Show, etc, etc.
Suck my wand?
Kiss my ass.
Yeah, you will get that occasionally.
I can see why this film performed as it did with audiences. It doesn't really do anything particularly well, and for people who aren't big fans of the actors involved, you won't get that kitsch factor that others probably would. One of the consistent comments from audiences online seems to be that they didn't think the leap from the small screen to the big screen was done very well here, and I think I would agree with that. Magicians feels just kind of cheap. It doesn't do enough to warrant being a film in my opinion. There's very little visual style to it, and while serviceable, other than a few moments, the film seems pretty much devoid of any creativity from the director. The audio is also just done really, really poorly. So much of the dialogue in this film was obviously re-recorded in post, and it's mixed so badly into the scenes. I'll play a bit of a particularly bad moment here. Bear in mind these characters are talking in the middle of a bustling hotel full of hundreds of people.
I think I would have remembered.
I definitely did tell you.
All right, son, back off a bit there. I'm still your dad.
What is going on there? Just completely amateurish stuff. I know some people may think that I'm being quite harsh overall here, but given the level of talent involved, this film really should have turned out a lot better. One aspect of Magicians that I really like though, as you may have been able to tell by my constant reference to it, is the bonus material that's included on the physical release of this film. In particular, the video diaries from David and Robert, and the commentary track for the film that features Mitchell and Webb, Sam Bain, Jesse Armstrong, Andrew O'Connor, and Ollie Madden. It has your standard commentary track stuff, like saying how much they like an actor when they appear for the first time and so on, but then for large parts they completely ignore what's going on in the film and instead basically just have discussions about other aspects of the production. There's a part where they talk about the differences between creating a film and a television show, the troubles around writing scripts, issues with securing funding, how making this film compares to other projects like Peep Show and so on. I know a lot of people probably don't care about things like this, but I found it really interesting. It sounds like a kind of stupid thing to say, but I think I'd be more likely to watch the film with a commentary track rather than the actual audio if I had to rewatch it again. So yeah, thumbs up from me for that. Though I have to point out one moment from it that really hasn't aged very well at all. In fact, it has aged horribly.
Earlier on in my career, I worked for Harvey Weinstein, the founder of Miramax, and he has a technique which is when he wants something in business, he just doesn't stop until he gets it.
Yeah. Anyway, the video diary segments are fun. In fact, I'd say that some of the off-the-cuff things David and Rob say in these bits are funnier than a lot of the dialogue in the actual film. Funny how that works out.
Turned out I had slightly more hair than the dummy, so the dummy was wrong because it was even balder than me.
If you think you like David and Robert aimlessly talking about things while filming themselves with a super hip mid-2000s camcorder, these are right up your alley. But overall thoughts on Magicians? It's just rather bland and disappointing. The story isn't very fun or engaging, and it's not funny enough to make you not care about the story and just focus on the jokes. A few good performances, a few standout scenes and lines, a decent idea here and there, but overall, from a cast with this much talent, it's a very lackluster final product. If you're really into the world of magic tricks and illusions, you'll probably get a lot more out of it, given just how much attention was paid to that aspect of the film, but to most of us, that attention will probably just come across as a whole lot of effort being put into the wrong places. This film gets a lot of 5s and 6s out of 10s from both audiences and critics, and that's firmly the area that I think it belongs. Not that I give numerical ratings or anything, but it just has that kind of feeling. The kind of thing that you watch, think, and then move on with your life. It's not horrible, but it's not all that good either. As I said at the start of this video, I don't think I'd ever actually seen this film before, and after watching it now, I don't think I was really missing out on much. Magicians wasn't quite as magic as I was hoping it would be.
Magic. It was a magic accident.